Hey everyone, today I'll be going over a tutorial on how to quickly make a HTTP client that makes multiple requests. And for this example, we are going to be requesting the GitHub API. This is a random repository I found. So we're going to call the polls endpoint, which lists the pull requests of that repo. And then we're going to print out the most recent .diff file. Cool, let's go ahead and get started. So you'll notice I've already structured a little bit of a binary. We have an input with a run function that takes some parameters. This has most of the URL broken down to the URL components coming in. We also have an HTTP client, which is essential. That's very important for testing. And then we're also parameterizing the standard output. That way we can test what the output is going to be. So let's first make our request. So we'll start by making our URL. U equals URL dot URL. Now we have a scheme. Scheme is p dot scheme. We have a host. P dot host. And we have our endpoint, so that's going to be our path. So it's going to be just like this. So let's do fmt.sprintf. And then we'll put that there. And then %s for string. That'll be our p.repo. Cool, now we have our URL. Let's make our request. So our request is going to be http.newRequest with context. Let's create a context. So ctx cancel equals context dot with timeout. Context.background, this could be an input to run too. And then let's do 1 times time.minute. We can just say time.minute. Defer cancel. Now request equals HTTP new request with context. So context first, and then the method. So http.method get. We're making a get request, and then URL u.string. And then body, we're doing nil because it's a GET request. So this returns an error. If error is not equal nil, return an error. Notice I've structured the run function to return an error so that we only have to exit once. Cool. Now we have our request. Let's do the request. So we have p.client.do request. So we're going to get a response. Response error equals client.do request. If error equals null, return error. Now we have a response. Now a very important thing with HTTP clients is that we check the HTTP status code. So we actually need to do that manually. So if the error is not equal nil, then we got a response, but it could be a bad response. So if the response dot status code does not equal 200, 200 is http.status OK, and the response dot status code doesn't equal status accepted, then we need to return an error. So return error. Now we don't have any information here. So when we get a bad exit response code, we also do get a response body. So let's try to read the body. If it fails, then something went wrong. It's okay. So io.readAll response.body, which is an IO read closer. Let's say request received a bad response code. We'll quote the code, and then we'll quote the body. So status code, body. Actually, we can just do double here. Cool. Now that we're there, we have our response. So the pull request response, if we pull up our terminal here, let's curl the pull request, and let's curl it into our test data. So let's go ahead and look at it. So it's in this structured format, it's JSON formatted, and one of the inputs is diff URL, which is what we're going to use. Now we could create this structure on our own, but the better option is to use something that already exists. So here we can use a GitHub pull request object. So let's grab that. So we're going to import GitHub, and then we're going to say bar pulls. It's going to be GitHub.pull request, and then let's if error equals JSON.new decoder. We're going to use our response.body as a decoder since it's a reader. Now, if the body was already in bytes, then we would use JSON.unmarshal. Then let's decode it to our pulls. So this needs to be by reference. That returns an error, so error is not equal to nil. Return error. Now let's make sure we're getting something. So fmt.println got %d pulls. Pulls. Cool. Add a new line. Let's try to run it. Go run main.go. So what's our request? Repos. Oh, I see. Cool. So we needed to remove this last slash and then it worked. All right, let's go ahead and get the diff. So our if the length of pulls, always do a panic check equals 0, return errors.new .0 pulls. We could use a better error message there, but it's good for now. And then so our diff URL equals pulls 0. We'll just take the first one we get, diff URL. This is actually a pointer, so we're going to say if we're going to say diff URL equals that. If diff URL equals nil, return errors.new, no diff URL found, and then we have our diff URL. So let's create a new request. So diff request error equals http dot request new request with context. Let's create a new context because maybe this one got close to the timeout. So we want to reset the timeout for the request. So we're going to put that here. It's going to be context again. We're going to do http.methodGet again. And then URL is going to be diff URL. And then we have nil again. Great. So let's, if error is not equal to nil, return error. Okay, now let's make our response. So we're going to do diff response error equals p.client.do diff request. That's all. If error is not equal to nil, return error. Now we actually want to do diff response.body.close in a defer. We actually forgot to do this before, so let's bring this up and let's do this here, defer response body.close. And then let's check our status code. So now we have diff response instead of response. So diff response, diff response, diff response, diff response. One thing that might be helpful here is to add a URL. So let's add request to this diff URL, So we get diff.ur, diff.response body. But the body is also in bytes, so we should probably make that a string too. Let's clean that up here too. String. And then u.string to URL %q. Great, and then now we want to print our diff response to the standard out. So we can do that with io.copy. Copy, because it's a reader, we can copy it to a writer. So standard out, and then our source is going to be diff response.body. Great, let's give it a shot. Go run main.go. Let's put it into a test.patch file to see if it's actually a .diff file. Nice, look at that. That is exactly what we wanted. So we went over a complicated HTTP request. Thanks everyone for watching, and tune in to the how do we test this in our next video.